Today on Arts 24, life after death in Sri Lanka with a prize-winning author. On his website, he describes himself as a Booker winner, writer of punchlines, manifestos and calls to action, failed cricketer, failed rock star, failed vegan, observer of people, machines and markets. He's published 2 novels. Chinaman, the legend of Pradeep Matthew, won the 2012 Commonwealth Book Prize. His second, The 7 Moons of Marley Almeida, won the world's most prestigious prize for an English language book, the Booker, last year. He's in Paris as his book, The 7 Moons, is being translated into French, as well as coming out in another 25 countries. Shehan Karunatilaka, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. You self-published your first book. You had difficulty selling your second, yet it won this massively prestigious prize. You're recognised as one of the greatest living Sri Lankan writers. It's quite a story. A year on from the Booker, how are you feeling?
Well, the year's over. My reign is over. I handed over my tiara and my sash to Paul Lynch, and so I'm kind of done. But yeah, it's been a tremendous year. And you're right, this book 3 years ago didn't look like it was going to get published outside of India. And in the meantime, Sri Lanka's been through a turbulent time, and in the midst of that, got a Booker shortlist and a Booker win. And I've pretty much been on the road for the last 12 months with microphones talking, not doing much writing, but it's been a tremendous year. But I'm glad to now leave the spotlight and crawl back into the shadows and start writing again.
And become a writer again. Yes. Well, in France, I'm the winner of the Goncourt, which is the most prestigious literary prize here. They get a cheque, it's symbolic, for €10. The winner of the Booker gets £50,000. I spoke to the Irish writer Paul Lynch, who just won this year's prize for the Prophet song, and I asked him what he's going to spend his money on. Here he is.
Yeah, I know exactly what I'm going to spend it on. I have a tracker mortgage that's gone up 75% since last year. So that's sorry, but you know, half it's spent already on covering the mortgage for the year. You know, I'm like everybody else. I have a house and a mortgage, and you know, the ECB rate hikes have been very punishing, and it's been very hard. So it's very welcome.
Shehan, £50,000. Does it make a difference to a writer's life?
It's not just the £50,000. It's also, like you said, 25 languages. I mean, my first book did reasonably well, but, you know, didn't travel as far as this one looks like it's going to. And so, yeah, your book's going to get read around the world and published in different markets. So that's the difference.
You bought the drum kit, though, you told me.
Yeah, so now Paul Lynch, that's a very grown-up way of spending the money. And look, I don't have extravagant tastes. I'm not into fast cars or anything, but I am into guitars, and I still spend my money on the same things I spent on when I was 14 years old: records and books and guitars. So yeah, I mean, I saved most of it, but yeah, I did buy myself a drum kit for my son, of course.
For your son, of course. Well, let's talk about the book then, 7 Moons. It took 8 years to write, set during the Sri Lankan Civil War and narrated by a dead man. It has been called part murder mystery, part ghost story, part political satire and part gay love story. It follows Marley Almeida, who's a ghost. He has 7 days to find out who killed him. Where did this story and this character come from?
Well, a long process. I wish I could say it came in one vision and I sat and wrote the book, but I think it started with this idea of what if the dead could speak? Because Sri Lanka, we're not too good at dealing with our past or talking about it. And when we do, it ends up being a squabble between whose fault it was and who's to blame. And I think that when I was writing this was the post-war period. So our 30-year war ended in 2009. And it was a time, especially for our generation, of great hope that we never thought this war would end. And then we thought, okay, now is a time that the country can move forward. But there was a lot of squabbling throughout. And I thought, clearly the living haven't got a clue about what just happened. Maybe we should talk to the dead. And that was the original title for the book, Chats with the Dead, interviewing the different ghosts, the different unsolved murders, the disappearances of that period. So that's where it came from. And then I came across this great war photographer, gambler, closet queen who finds himself dead and has 7 days to solve his own murder. But that initially it was just trying to make sense of what had happened over the last 30 years by talking to the victims.
Well, you set the book in Sri Lanka in 19 89. For those who might not be familiar with Sri Lanka's civil war, what made you decide to set the book that particular year?
Well, the obvious place to set it would have been 2009, the tail end of the war, that last phase where there were many civilian casualties, and that's when the LTT were vanquished. And I wasn't brave enough to talk about, and even now talking about recent history is quite contentious. And so sadly, there was many periods in history I could have chosen. And I remember 1989, 90, because I was a teenager at the time, and it was a very confusing time because we had three conflicts going on at the same time. You had the separatist war with the Tamil Tigers, you had a Marxist insurrection in the south, and you had the Indian peacekeeping force on the ground. And I just remember, I wasn't very politically aware at the time, but going to school and you'd see a dead body on the side of the road, and the grown-ups would say, "Don't look that way," and you'd ask these questions: who was that person? Why were they killed? And it could have been anyone. There was no answers for it. It could have been a suspected terrorist, or it could have been someone from the armed forces. But this was our reality growing up in Colombo. And so I went back 30 years later to really make sense of it. I didn't make that much sense even then, but I found a lot of unintentional absurdity and comedy, and I think that sort of comes into the book of this atheist nihilist who didn't believe that there was afterlife or any system to it, suddenly finds himself in this bizarre situation where and he's got this cache of photographs, this box of photographs of war crimes and atrocities, which he believes, if it's seen, would end all wars. And that's really the premise of the story. Beyond the grave, he's trying to make his life's work seen.
Well, you are the first Sri Lankan novelist to win the Booker since Michael Ondaatje won for The English Patient back in 1992. When you won, you received sort of tweets congratulating you from the Sri Lankan president and the leader of the opposition. What reaction, I wonder, did you get from Sri Lankan people?
Yeah, so that was quite strange. Also, I'm really hopeless on social media. Now I have a team but I barely answer emails. So when the president, leader of the opposition are all tweeting congratulations, I was wondering, how do I reply? But then I don't reply to anything. And I let the Twitter mob descend on them, saying, well, have you actually read the book? Because it's talking about you guys. But generally, I think at the time when it happened, we had an economic collapse. There were no books coming in, so no one had read the book. But people have read it now. And look, it's not like I made any of this stuff up. So there's not many controversial claims in the book. In fact, the real story is far more gruesome. So generally, it's been accepted well. And we like to celebrate whether we win at the cricket or at the Booker. So it's been accepted well. But of course, there's always trolls. But a tiny minority.
Well, you live in Colombo. Last year, the country was facing its worst economic crisis in 7 decades. Tell us, what's daily life like now?
Well, it's been a year, and it depends who you talk to. But yeah, there's water in the taps, there's petrol in the pumps, and things are moving along, and money's come in. And it seems, we say that we're resilient, and I think maybe we are. But also, like I say, we tend to forget what went on. So things are better, and it's still a beautiful country. Please visit. We need the tourists, and it's a great place to write novels from. But there's still a long way to go. I think, the poor and the working class still are suffering and have challenges ahead of them. But at least, people aren't on the streets and things are working. So we're back to, and Sri Lankans, same with the cricket team. They lose spectacularly, but then suddenly they produce a victory and we're like, okay, we're back. And I think that's the feeling now in Sri Lanka.
Optimism. Okay, well, as you said earlier, this is the last day of a year-long media sort of frenzy about you winning the Booker Prize. This is your last interview today. You've written children's books, including, I enjoy these titles, Please Don't Put That in Your Mouth and Where Shall I Poop?
Where Shall I Poop is my masterpiece, I think. Forget 7 Moons, but yes.
According to the famous cricket book Wisden, your first novel, Chinaman, is the second best book about cricket ever written. Tell us, what are you going to work on next?
Well, it's bad luck to talk about books that haven't been written. But I'm in the middle of a 3rd novel, but I am writing couple more children's books. I'm researching insects, which I'm getting obsessed with. Got a few short stories, and the 3rd novel is not going to write itself, no matter how many accolades the last one won. So, looking forward to getting back into the grind and hiding in a darkened room and typing. But plenty of writing assignments too.
But you will be again inspired by Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's a beautiful country filled with absurdity and an abundance of stories. So yeah, the next book will be about Sri Lanka. Yeah, I won't say too much, but I think it'll be a sillier, lighter book. This one was quite heavy, a lot of corpses, a lot of politics. I think the next one will be slightly lighter, but let's see.
Okay, well, we always end our shows with our guests' cultural pick of the moment. What have you chosen for us?
Well, the album I've been listening to obsessively for the last month is the soundtrack to Killers of the Flower Moon. And I tend to listen to soundtracks now when I write no hip-hop or rock and roll because it distracts me. And yeah, I started listening to it. It's by the late great Robbie Robertson, and it's just very atmospheric. It's got Native American music, jazz standards from the time, but also this very brooding guitar-based soundtrack. And I've been just playing it all the time. I watched the movie. I was less impressed by the movie, but the soundtrack's a masterpiece. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to leave you with that to listen at home. Shehan Karunatilaka, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure to be one of your final interviews of the year. The 7 Moons of Mala Almeida is out in France in January. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Expecting a miracle to make all this go away. You know they don't happen anymore.
I'm Paul Rees, covering stories from Sweden for France 24, live from Stockholm and on France 24 news programmes.
Paul Rees, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.